Hello students, welcome to another lecture of human anatomy and physiology, and in today's lecture we will be discussing about the peripheral nervous system. So let's start. So talking about the peripheral nervous system, this part of the nervous system consists of the spinal nerves, the cranial nerves and the autonomic nervous system, which is further subdivided into sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system. We'll be discussing about all these three divisions in details in our coming slides and further in our coming lectures. So talking about the sympathetic division of the nervous system, so this particular division mainly prepares the body for dealing with the periods of increased physical activity, right? And it basically acts through the regulation of blood vessels, dilating the pupil, increasing the heart rate and increasing or decreasing the blood pressure. Now talking about the parasympathetic nervous system, this division of the nervous system helps the body to conserve energy, right? It has rest and digest, feeding and breathing functions. This is carried out by actions that slow down the cardiovascular system, and it slows down your heartbeat and the functioning of the heart. It stimulates the gland secretion and it increases the peristalsis. Peristalsis is the contraction and relaxation movement of the alimentary canal. Now coming to the spinal nerves. So there are 31 pairs of spinal nerves and they are named and grouped according to the vertebrae with which they are associated with. There are 8 cervical nerves, 12 thoracic nerves, 5 lumbar nerves, 5 sacral nerves and 1 coccygeal nerve. Now although there are only 7 cervical vertebrae, there are 8 nerves because the first pair leaves the vertebral canal between the occipital bone and the atlas, and the 8th pair leaves below the last cervical vertebrae. Therefore the nerves are given the name and number of the vertebrae immediately above, right? Now talking about the thoracic nerves, there are 12 pairs and the first 11 are the intercostal nerve. They pass between the ribs, supplying them the intercostal muscles and overlying the skin. The 12th pair comprises the subcostal nerve, and the 7th to 12th thoracic nerves, they also supply the muscle and the skin of the posterior and the anterior abdominal walls. Now talking about the cranial nerves. Now there are 12 pairs of cranial nerves originating from the nuclei in the inferior surface of the brain. Some are sensory in nature, some are motor in nature and some are mixed in nature, right? Their name suggests their distribution or their function, which in the main is generally related to the head and the neck, and they are numbered using the Roman numericals according to the order they connect the brain. So the first is your olfactory nerve, second is your optic nerve, third is your oculomotor nerve, fourth is your trochlear nerve, fifth is your trigeminal nerve, sixth is your abducens, seventh is your facial, 8th is your vestibulocochlear, 9th is your glossopharyngeal, 10th is your vagus, 11th is accessory and 12th is the hypoglossal nerve. Now coming to the olfactory nerve. Olfactory nerves are sensory in nature. They are the nerves of sense of smell. Their sensory receptors and nerve fibers, they originate in the upper part of the mucous membrane of the nasal cavity, and they mainly pass upwards, right, and then pass to the olfactory bulb. Now these nerves then proceed backward as the olfactory tract to the area for the perception of smell, which is present in the temporal lobe of the cerebrum. Next is your optic nerve. So as the name suggests, these are the nerves of the sense of sight. Oculomotor nerves, these nerves arise from the nuclei which is present near the cerebral aqueduct, and they mainly supply the muscles which help your eyeball to move. Next is your trochlear nerve. Now these nerves arise from the nuclei present near the cerebral aqueduct, and they supply the superior oblique muscles of the eye. Coming to trigeminal nerve, trigeminal nerves are mixed in nature. These nerves contain motor fiber as well as sensory fibers, and they are among the largest of the cranial nerves. They are the chief sensory nerves for face and head, transmitting sensory impulses like pain, temperature and touch, and the motor fiber, they stimulate the muscle for chewing. Now coming to abducens nerves. Abducens nerve is motor in nature. These nerves arise from the nuclei which lie under the floor of the fourth ventricle of the brain. They supply the lateral rectus muscle of the eyeball, causing abduction, as the name suggests. Now the facial nerve. Facial nerve is also mixed in nature. These nerves are composed of both motor as well as sensory nerve fiber, arising from the nuclei in the upper part of the pons. Pons is a part of your brain. Now the motor fibers supply the muscles of the facial expression, and the sensory fiber, they convey impulses from the taste bud in the anterior 2/3 of the tongue to the taste perception area in the cerebral cortex. Now coming to the vestibular cochlear nerves, these nerves, they are composed of two divisions as the name suggests. The first is the vestibular nerves and the second is your cochlear nerve. The vestibular nerves, they arise from the semicircular canals of the inner ear and they convey the impulse to the cerebellum. And the cochlear nerve, they originate in the spiral organ in the inner ear and they convey impulse to the hearing area in the cerebral cortex where the sound is perceived. Now talking about your glossopharyngeal nerves, they are also mixed in nature. The motor fiber arise from the nuclei in the medulla oblongata and stimulate the muscles of the tongue and pharynx and the secretory cells of the salivary glands. And the sensory fibers, they convey impulse to the cerebral cortex from the posterior third of the tongue, the tonsils and the pharynx, and from taste buds in the tongue. Now coming to your vagus nerves. Vagus nerves are also mixed in nature. These nerves have the most extensive distribution of cranial nerves. They pass downwards to the neck into the thorax and the abdomen. These nerves form an important part of the parasympathetic nervous system. The motor fibers of the vagus nerve, they arise from the nuclei in the medulla and they supply the smooth muscle and secretory glands of your pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, heart, esophagus, stomach, intestine, gallbladder, right? And the sensory fibers, they convey impulse from the membrane lining the same structures to the brain. Now coming to the accessory nerves. Accessory nerves are also motor in nature. These nerves arise from the nuclei in the medulla oblongata and in the spinal cord. The last type of nerve is your hypoglossal nerve. Hypoglossal is also motor in nature. These nerves arise from the nuclei which is present in the medulla oblongata. They supply the muscles of the tongue and muscles surrounding the hyoid bone which is present in your throat area and contribute to swallowing and speech. So thank you so much dear students. This was all in today's lecture. If you have any queries, any doubt in today's lecture, please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you for attending the class.